Okay, well, let's get, it's so nice to see everybody. So, well, oh yeah, sorry. All right, so welcome everybody to the November 9th meeting of the Bowmanville Rotary Club. I first want to welcome our guests that are joining us this morning. I don't think there's any online. There's no guests online, I don't think. No, so here with us today, we have John Kay and Doug McShane and Warrant Officer Duncan Nyberg. Yeah, so thank you for joining us. We're going to start with our invocation. Lisa, if you could. Is she muted?
She's muted.
There she is. Okay.
May all gathered here be blessed. May our courage match our convictions and our integrity match our hopes. May our faith bring us closer to each other. May our meeting with the past and present bring blessings for the future.
Thank you, Lisa. In honor of Remembrance Day, I'm going to ask you to stand and we're going to have O Canada. We're not going to sing, we're just going to, you can sing along if you want, but it's in multi-languages, so. Okay. We have a very, it's kind of a heavy week of meeting today. It's all about Remembrance Day. And so to start that off, John has a video that he's going to share with us and talk to us about.
Ready. So where to begin? There we are. War. There is no glory in war, only suffering and grief, and most of all, there is death. Today, many years after, there are plenty of visual evidence to remind us. I have, like many of you, visited cemeteries of war graves. You don't have to travel far in Europe to find one. In this video, you will see one in Luxembourg, where I lived for a few years. This is the final resting place of over 5,000 souls, mostly American and mostly young men. There are 22 sets of brothers lying side by side, and there is one female, an army nurse. They all sacrificed their lives in the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge marked the last major offensive attempted by the Axis powers on the Western Front. The cemetery and the land on it was given to the USA by Luxembourg and is consequently a part of the USA. The graves are marked by row upon row of white crosses and a few stars of David. The markers are white Lhasa marble and are meticulously cleaned every day, and the grounds maintained by the people of Luxembourg. When we took this video, it was by coincidence that it was approaching 11 o'clock. And as the clock chimed, everything stopped, as it does every day. And a moment of silence is observed. General George Patton, when he died, requested that he be laid to rest beside his men, and his final resting place is also in the same cemetery. Close by, in a town of Bastogne in Belgium, which held out in a siege, remembers hourly the sacrifices made by American soldiers. On the hour, every hour, the clock at the main square chimes a few bars of the Star-Spangled Banner. In this video following the last post, please observe a few minutes of silence. One.
Well, how do you do, young Willie McBride? Do you mind if I sit here down by your graveside and rest for a while neath the warm summer sun? I've been walking all day and I'm nearly done. I see by your gravestone you were only 19 when you joined the Great Fallen in 1916. I hope you died well, and I hope you died clean. Or young Willie McBride, was it slow and unseen? Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife lowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? Did you leave a wife or a sweetheart behind? In some faithful heart is your memory enshrined. Although you died back in 1916, in that faithful heart are you forever 19? Or are you a stranger without even a name, enclosed then forever behind a glass frame? In an old photograph, torn, battered and stained, and faded to yellow in a brown leather frame. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife lowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? The sun, now it shines on the green fields of France. There's a warm summer breeze, makes the rain.
But Gail, I'd like to invite you up to introduce your son to us.
Gail, while you're up there, click your heels together and say there's no place like home for you.
No. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce my son. I had to ask him his rank. I couldn't remember. Warrant Officer Duncan Nyberg. Our family has dealt with the military since Duncan was about 11 years old. He will tell his story if I tell it all, but he joined the cadets when he was 11, and we've dealt with Queen's York Rangers ever since. Duncan has been in a number of places, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and I think one of his favorites, though, is up in the Arctic. He did some tours up there, and maybe he'll tell you about it. We did send Ron some pictures of various places, and we'll show them, but I'm going to leave it to Duncan to tell his story. Duncan.
President, executive, Rotarians, fellow guests, and past soldiers and veterans, if you're you're here in the room. I want to thank you for having me at your meeting. I won't lie, I'm a little overwhelmed up here. I'm used to speaking to grade school kids and middle school kids and high school kids. So it's a little bit different looking down and seeing adults.
We've been seeing it before.
It's okay, I can handle it. Especially my mom for inviting me to be here. I really appreciate it. For those of us who've served or serving, this week in general is a difficult time for us sometimes. I didn't really realize it until the last few years where I've had perspective and be able to look back at my time and career. First of all, the pictures that you're going to see up there, I'm not sure what my wife was able to find and get to my mom last night. But if there's anything there anybody wants to speak to, I'm welcome to any questions about it that I'll try to answer. I'll just start off. I'll just give you a little bit of rundown about myself. And it's the one time of Remembrance Day I'd rather not do is talk about myself and rather talk about the selfless acts of the veterans who are no longer here with us today. However, sometimes it's easier just to talk about my experience so we can lead to discussion about things that the folks here want to talk about. And I'm open to any questions or any topic. There's not anything that I'm not willing to speak to. Just to give you a quick rundown on myself, my mom mentioned that I joined cadets when I was 12 years old. I didn't know much about the military or Army cadets at that age. In fact, when the police strongly suggested I join Army cadets, I wasn't sure what I was going to expect when I got on the Dawes 23 bus on the main subway, Main Street subway to Bathurst subway, the 511 streetcar to the exhibition. I kind of thought when I would get off the streetcar, it would be like MASH. I expected a Jeep to come up and pick me up, and we go to the mess hall and put some slop in a can. And that's kind of what I expected, and it wasn't quite that. My obligations to the Cadet Corps, recommended by the police, was that I stay there for two months. And of the four of us that went that day, after the 2 months was up, I obviously stayed and fell in love with the military and the cadets. And it absolutely changed my life for me. My regiment is the Queen's York Rangers. We're an armored reconnaissance regiment. It's a reserve regiment in Toronto. However, of the first 17 years of my career, I was full-time reserve, which will probably add to a whole lot more questions, but it is possible to be in the reserve and be full-time. In 1995, one of the first really big opportunities I had to serve was in the Arctic. I was in RV Northwest Territories at the time, which is now part of Nunavut, where we spent about 6 weeks with our First Nation compadres up there, the Rangers, which is a fantastic opportunity. I worked in many jobs within the military, transport NCO and the QM, taking courses. So, but my really big event, life-changing event in my career was my opportunity to serve overseas in Kosovo. And most of the people here in this room, when I actually say Kosovo or I talk about the war in the Balkans, most people here understand that and know that. When I speak to young kids and we talk about Kosovo and the Balkans and peacekeeping, they have a blind stare and it's difficult to talk to it. But as most people could probably remember, Kosovo was with basically NATO under the UN mandate. I went in there to protect the minority Albanians from what it appeared to be from Serbian actions that were going to be taken against them. Because of what happened in Bosnia, there was a lot of concern that was going to happen in Albania. I won't talk too much about that tour unless anybody has specific questions about it, but it was a great opportunity for me to serve. And on that tour, I received the Canadian Forces Peacekeeping Medal and a medal for being in Kosovo. I served on a number of domestic operations as well. One that's going to make you laugh is the big snowstorm of Toronto. It was just winter of 1998. And it's funny, I just recently got interviewed by the Toronto Star. They wanted to interview soldiers that participated in that action, should I call it action, in that event that happened in Toronto. And there was a lot of laughter, right? I mean, I mentioned it, expecting some laughter. But what most people don't realize, especially people that didn't live right in Toronto at the time, is there were people trapped in their houses for well over a week. They couldn't even open their front door. Fire hydrants were covered in snow. If there was a fire, police and fire wouldn't be able to access the fire hydrants if houses burned down. It could be multiple houses that burned down before they got to them. There were people that had medical issues that required ambulances to get them, and ambulances couldn't get them. And the military aided in a number of ways, from digging out fire hydrants to digging out people's houses, opening up the streets, and being able to have heavy equipment come in and remove the snow. A meter of snow in most of Ontario would not cripple your area, but in Toronto it actually truly did. And I think that the military being called in, even though we all laugh at it, was actually a good cause. The ice storm in the winter previous to that in Eastern Ontario that blew out hydro lines and a lot of people were out of power. Similar. My regiment was called to go to Eastern Ontario. In fact, we were in Lanark County, which is just a stone throw away from my in-laws and where they live. And the Canadian Forces was pivotal also in helping the folks there too. There were people there that had no power for 2-3 weeks. And I don't know if you know, very familiar with the Ottawa Valley in Lanark County. There were some people there that we knocked on the door and we asked if they were okay. And they said, well, of course we are. They said, well, you've not had any power for a week. They said, we haven't had power ever. So I thought that was quite interesting to see that. There were some people there that didn't even know. In fact, actually, there was one gentleman who was a Carleton professor, university for math at the University of Carleton. And the police officer asked myself and a section of us to go to his house to see if he was okay. I said, okay, well, where does he live? He said, well, he doesn't really have an address. We're just going to tell you the bend in the road where there's a trail that you can find. And I guess the rigors of life and whatnot, he decided that he was going to become a hermit and didn't really want to participate in anything anymore. So he packed up his stuff and moved into the woods, into a shack. And as we came up the trail, we noticed that somebody had already gone up and down the trail. And we got to what was supposed to be his house, and it was just like a shack where the seams of the house were open. You could look into his house. There was a chicken coop with chickens around. And we looked in the house that had no windows. And there's just piles and piles of soup cans, Campbell soup cans. And so we thought he was fun. So we left a bunch of food. We left some candles. Hershey's had donated some chocolate. We left that. And we walked out. And as we walked out, we saw this older gentleman with a sleigh, a big beard in rough shape, missing a lot of teeth, pulling chicken feed. I guess his neighbor supplies him chicken feed. So we talked to that man and said, I said, I'm Master Corporal Niber of the Canadian Armed Forces. We're here to see if you're okay. He cried. And this is a man who'd left society, left everything behind, even family, his job, his career, and reputation to move into the woods. He just couldn't believe that somebody would just wanted to find out if he was okay, which I thought was an interesting story. So with that being said, I've done a few domestic operations. I've been to the Arctic 2 further times in 2008, 2009. And actually, I've lots to talk about sovereignty and our operations in the Arctic, if anybody has any questions about it. But my main opportunity to serve in the armed forces was Afghanistan, obviously. My job was a convoy escort commander with the members of the Ontario Regiment, by the way, some really awesome members. John Tymek, who's now with them, served with me there from the Ontarios. And my job was convoy escort. So basically, everybody's probably familiar with Afghanistan a little bit, especially in the recent news of how most of Afghanistan has fallen to the Taliban. But one of the major bases in the south was Kandahar Airfield. There was probably 10,000 soldiers at the height of when Canada was there. And I believe even after Canada left, that has gone up to even 25,000 soldiers or civilians that all worked on that base. Huge base. Even while we were there, the perimeter just kept on growing outwards. Our job was to bring people, food, equipment, supplies, mail, anything to the further out FOBs and the combat outposts that were spread throughout Kandahar. Kandahar province is a very large province, and that was Canada's area of responsibility. If anybody could imagine what 3,000 soldiers looks like, it could try to imagine how 3,000 soldiers could hold the territory the size of, Nova Scotia. Well, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit on that, but maybe PEI. It was a big chunk of land that we were trying to hold, and it was impossible. Canada had two battle groups. It was an American battle group and the Canadian battle group that formed the organization that protected us with about 6,000 soldiers. When we left, we basically gave up most of Kandahar province to be looked after by the Americans, and they replaced us with 15,000 soldiers to do the job. So it was a big job trying to defend that area. And while I was there, for the 7 months I was there, we lost 26 Canadians that died during that time. I had a couple stories I was going to talk about it, but I don't think I'm going to.
Tell us about your interpreter and then what happened.
Okay, that's good. So I had an interpreter, Abdul Karami, and Abdul was our favorite interpreter that we had in Afghanistan. We had about 6 or 7 interpreters, and they never knew where we were going for operational security purposes. So we left to go on a convoy. We'd leave the front gate, go to the interpreter compound, and we would just tell them which interpreter was coming with us. They had no idea they were going anywhere. In fact, most of the time they were lounging around, not ready to go, other than a sleeping bag. We said, let's go. And they would jump in the vehicle and we go. We always wanted to get Abdul. Abdul would listen to an ICOM radio. An ICOM radio was just a regular radio that picked up frequencies throughout Afghanistan. And he would try to listen to see if there was anything that could be used to help us aid us in our convoys. Because we were convoy escort, we spent a lot of time on the road. And as most of you are probably aware, that's where most of the Canadians passed away from IEDs on the road. So it was handy to have somebody who was listening in on the Taliban or perceived enemies radio traffic to see if they heard something that could affect us. And there were many times that Abdul would say, Sergeant Nyberg, I heard on the radio, our convoys come through. They said, on the way back, detonate the IED on the second vehicle because that's the weakest vehicle in your in the convoy, which was astonishing in the fact that they knew which of our vehicles were stronger than others. It was Bison, by the way, as you're probably aware. Actually, during Oka, there was a Bison used, and our First Nations that were up against the Canadians that were in that action fired an AK-47 at the Bison, which is a 308 round or 7.62 round. It actually penetrated the armor of that vehicle to give perspective. So it was the softest skin vehicle in the convoy. So based on his information, we were able to change the vehicles up in the order of march. Unfortunately, we weren't able to change the route. There's only one route into patrol base Berwangar from Massamgar, and we had to run the gauntlet, knowing there's a good chance we're going to get IED'd on the way out of there. That's one example of how Abdul was helpful to us. I felt it was necessary when Abdul came to me and said, I want to get out of here. My father was killed by the Taliban. I have an uncle or a general that in the government, they're threatening to kill him. My family lives in a compound. If even my cousins knew I worked for Canada, my life would be in danger. Is there any chance you could help get me out of Afghanistan? So this is while I was still there. This was in 2009. So I wrote a letter of recommendation for him. And I thought, well, one recommendation letter from Sergeant Nyberg is probably not going to help. So I got many letters of recommendations from other soldiers that he worked with. And I was able to come up with 25 letters on his behalf. In 2011, he was accepted into Canada and now resides here. In fact, we invited him to our regimental Christmas dinners a few times. And he now owns a trucking company in BC. 2 trucks, does long hauls, makes very good money. He's not dependent on the Canadian system in any way, shape, or form. However, he has a brother-in-law who did work for Canada, his wife who's still in Afghanistan, and his sister who's still in Afghanistan. So I wrote letters of recommendations for them as well, and so did some of our other friends. That's how much we trusted and respected Abdul. So his family now has visas to come to Canada, but no way to get here. They never made it to the airport. In fact, they never even got out of Kandahar before Kandahar fell. If that answers the question that you had there. I'm gonna go into one of the question parts. It's a lot easier for me to talk based on those. And I read some questions that some of you find folk sent, and they're really good questions I'd love to answer. But I just want to say that today is the end of the 27th day of my career. I joined on the 9th of November, 1994, by the way. So happy anniversary to me. I'm in the middle of medically releasing from the military, and I'm hoping that this is probably the 28th will be my last year in the military. So with that being said, I'm going to go to questions. Yes, sir.
Sure. Thank you very much for serving. We appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Just a little bit of background. My own father-in-law was a career Air Force guy.
Yeah.
He spent pretty well his whole career here. He actually helped build Dulon.
Okay. Yep, the Dulon's a radar system.
And my wife was a reservist for a few years as well. So well done. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
I want to know, I know people in the military love telling stories.
Yeah.
Was there an event or an interaction with somebody or with someplace where you felt particularly Canadian and that you were representing Canada, you were doing everything? Is there an event or an occasion where you had that?
Absolutely. In Kosovo, our military, compared to a lot of the other armies there, were very well respected. And you definitely felt that way when you went in. An example being Mitrovica is a town in Kosovo that's got a very, in Kosovo, to give you some background, majority of it is Albanian. They're Muslims. Kosovo was a breakaway province of Serbia. There's about 10 to 15% of Kosovo is made up of Serbians. Mitrovica is a more prominent majority town of minority Serbians, if that makes any sense. So it's a bigger town there. And there was riots. Apparently, Albanians were going to cross a bridge to burn down an Orthodox church. The French were there. We all know about the French. The French, just joking. The French were there to try to hold the Albanians back from going into Mitrovica to burn down the church. Basically, they were falling. They were not holding that bridge very well. They fired tear gas at the crowd, which had no effect. We just happened to be, my organization over there was, I was in two troop, Coyote troop, and I was in an HLVW, which was just had ammunition and food and rations following him behind. So we just got asked to help the French. So when we got there wasn't any French on the bridge. In fact, they tear gassed us accidentally. But the Canadians never left the bridge. The Canadians stayed on the bridge, and all we had was our rifles and pickaxe handles we took out of our truck. And we beat everybody back. That reputation is something that preceded us everywhere we went. Oh, the Canadians, the ones that beat back the folks there with pickaxe handles and got gassed by the French. I'm just joking about the French.
No, you're not.
But
That's okay.
it did bother me at the time that day that they tear gassed us accidentally. And we didn't have masks. From that point on, we all had to carry masks. If that answers your question there. And you know, I'm sure everybody is familiar with young folk touring Europe. And they say, make sure when you travel Europe, they're going to think you're Americans. Make sure you have a big Canadian flag on the back of your backpack. That was true. I traveled Europe on my leave in January 2000. And it's funny because I sewed on a Canadian flag on there like I was told to. And I remember sitting beside somebody on the train, like, oh, you guys are Canadians too. Like, we're Americans. We sewed a Canadian flag on the back. So I thought that was kind of fun. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned at the start that you were a reservist, but full time.
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
Absolutely. In the reserves is a part-time organization. We serve one night a week, 1 weekend a month. And traditionally, we spent 2 weeks in the summertime training, going on courses or on course. And I'm sure you can attest to this. It's changed over the course of the years where we used to do more in one way and less in others. The reserve also has a component called Class B. Class B is a contract that where they take a reservist part-time, they put him into a contract for up to 6 months on a full-time contract. Class BA is where basically you're filling a position that's deemed a full-time position permanently. So it's called a BA position. That would be a Class B contract that's greater than 180 days, but could be a 1 year or a 3 year contract. That's what I did for the most of my first 17 years in the military, outside of when I was operational, like on the ice storm, snowstorm, when I went to the Arctic on sovereignty operations. Those then become Class C, which is operational. Afghanistan, Kosovo, and all those things were Class C, which means you're given and afforded all the rights and benefits that a regular force soldier would have while serving because you're now operational.
Augmenting the regular force.
Augmenting the regular force, exactly. And for me, I did that. In fact, actually, I applied for the elevator trade many times throughout my reserve career, and I applied through Helmets and Hard Hats. I was actually one of the first soldiers in Toronto to be hired through the Helmets and Hard Hats program, all of the program, but first in our elevator trade for sure. And I was actually working full-time at LFCA at the time. And my contract, it's hard to get out of your contract when you have one. But my contract, I was actually backfilling a woman who was on, or a girl that was on maternity leave. And they asked me to stay 2 more months. And I said, sure, I'll stay 2 months verbally. My contract ended in 2 days. So I got a phone call from the elevator union that said, would you like to get in the trade now? And I'm like, geez, I'd love to, but I just signed up for 2 more months. I'm not sure if I can. So I said, let me check my chain of command. I said, I can't remember his name, Captain Sir. I said, I just got an opportunity to go a better civilian job. And I know I said I'd like to sign up for 2 more months, but I didn't sign anything. Can you honor my obligation of the next 2 days only so I can get out of it? And they did. So, I mean, it is a contract. You can get out of it. It's a little bit more flexible. And the higher rank you go in the senior NCO level, the less positions are available, which is the reason why I wanted to move on. In the officer ranks, there's quite a few more. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Yes, sir.
Duncan, from your perspective, what was accomplished by
That's a fantastic question. And, I went in to Afghanistan in 2008, with a very different idea of how I felt when I left. I'm going to say my politics are generally centered. My politics, I'm fairly progressive. When I see the military go and do something, I feel that we're going in there to do good in the world. That's how I felt at the time when I went into Afghanistan. I'll tell you that the people of Afghanistan are wonderful people, very hospitable, very friendly. The children in particular are the same as if you went out been seeing our kids here. They're very open and they just want to. They're curious and they obviously they want stuff from us because they're poor there, but they're good kids. And that was part of the hardest part of being there. We were there for 11 years. I think Canada was there, and the America was there almost 20 years. Feels like the amount of money that was spent and the time and the soldiers that we lost there might not be worth it right now. What I'd like to say is we left an impression. I'd like to think that, even with the difference between the old Taliban and the new Taliban, there's a difference. And that difference may be because of us. That old Taliban went in there very heavy-handed. They abused women, children, persecuted, marginalized segments of society like the Hazara and other minority groups there. And they harbor terrorists. And because of that, we went in there and we basically threw their government out and we occupied their country for 20 years. In that 20 years, I think we did a lot of positive things, especially the Canadians. We built schools, we built wells, we built roads, and we just treated them, the Afghans that worked with us, like allies, friends, brothers and sisters in arms. And I think that will go a long way in the future to have an impression on them. And if you take a look at the Taliban now, early in their new reign, but they don't seem to be the Taliban they used to be. And I think they know that if they don't change their ways and they're not as progressive as the old regime, that we might go back. And I think a lot of other countries around the world know that if they harbor terrorists and they treat people the way they will, the Americans might come and occupy them for 20 years too. So hopefully that just leaves that impression on the world, and hopefully that answers your question to some degree.
Well, I want to thank you, Duncan, for coming.
No
As
problem.
Joe said, we all want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
We could probably go on and on, but as you said at the beginning, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a couple gentlemen tell us about how we're honoring those who we have lost.
Thank you.
Not necessarily in war, but over the years. So,
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being here. And I'm sure if there's more questions, people can chat with you after.
And thank you all for your service.
So I'm going to invite now, John and Doug are going to come forward. I'm here in town, and I know it's spread. It's gotten bigger and bigger every year. The banners that are hanging around town, and I think we're into Orono and Tyrone and a couple more places now. So I'd like to invite you gentlemen up to tell us a little bit about that.
Amy, can I remain seated?
Yes, of course you can.
Thank you. Okay, first of all, I gotta say, Duncan, wasn't me that recommended you for the Army, but I worked at West End.
Oh.
Well, I can see it worked out well.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, it was a good call.
I'm proud of my East End brother for doing that.
Yeah, good to work.
Okay, so we've been asked to explain our banner program here. That's the main reason. I have another reason that we'll get to that in a minute. But the banner program is, as we develop this, well, I'll read the mission statement. It's to pay tribute to our local veterans, deceased veterans, and active service members or veterans who have a family association with the communities of Clarington. Honor the contributions and sacrifices these veterans made on our behalf of our communities, our nation, and in fact, the global theater. And lastly, to promote remembrance in our communities. Now, that is enough motivation for people to get together to do this, but there is other motivation. There was an instigator that got us going, and it was Aaron O'Toole. Aaron had tried to previously to get the Legion interested in the banner programs. Now, the banner programs have been in existence in Canada. The first one was in Sackville, New Brunswick, and it was over 10 years ago. Now, Aaron, in his constituency here, well, he takes in Fort Perry, and I believe at one point or another, he also took in Uxbridge. And both of these communities had banner programs. And Aaron was very impressed by them. And his second go round happened in November of 2018. And he more or less conscripted a few of the people that are now on our committee to try and do something to get the banner program going here. All right, so from there on, we talked about it. The programs that were in existence, particularly the Uxbridge program, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, they had set up one and had it running. And in March of 2019, they were good enough to invite us over for a meeting, and they just laid out how they did everything. And we used a lot of their suggestions and a lot of what they did. We needed two things, they said. The first thing was the cooperation of the Legion branch, because that gives you the legitimacy. And the second thing is the cooperation of the municipal government, because you cannot do this without the local government. So we needed those two approvals. And in May of 2019, we made the pitch to the Legion executive, and they were on board, but with one caveat. The Legion's not a very flush with funds. They said, fine, we can make you a committee of the Legion, even a non-official committee because you're not on the executive, but this has to be a self-sustaining program. Therefore, the Legion budget cannot account for the costs that's going to entail. And in June of 2019, we made the same pitch to the municipal council at a council meeting. At that point, there was about 9 living World War II veterans living in Clarington. Well, I had 5 of them at that meeting, all dressed up with their medals. And I mean, it was a cakewalk. The councillors decided, yes, they will support this. They appointed their work department to work with us in the physical establishment of the banners themselves and the locations. But in the meantime, we went out, and of course, the 3 most famous veterans in Clarington are the Colville brothers. And in the meantime, we went out and got 3 banners representing the Colville brothers. And we also actually had to purchase the pole hardware to hang them and display them. The first place we displayed was in 2019 in June, and it was at your Rib Fest. And we got the appropriate publicity with this, and we were off and running. And we depend almost entirely on sponsorship fees and some funding from the municipal government. And they agree that they will fund us, the government. And the first year, we managed to get 20 banners up in Bowmanville. In the second year, that had increased to 52 banners. And Clarington is in a partnership with us on this. We had to go to the other communities in Clarington too. Orono and Newcastle received banners in 2020. This year, we've added Tyrone to that. Tyrone is a unique little place. As a village, they're very proud of their veterans up there. And the community effort up in Tyrone resulted in the community up there wanting their veterans honored in Tyrone itself. This year, there's a total of 80 banners. How far can this go? Well, we might be limited by polls, but I'll give you a good example. Uxbridge itself has 200 banners. And they're doubled up on polls, and mostly in Uxbridge, but they had to cap it. They can't take any more applications as far as that's concerned. So will we ever get to that point? Well, we're out of polls in downtown Bowmanville, but out by the Clarington Place there and the big box stores, there's all kinds of polls out there, and that's where we have to expand as far as Bowmanville. Okay, so that was that explains our program, but we had to start somewhere. And here's the other reason I'm glad we're here is, as I mentioned, 3 banners for the Colville brothers and all the pole hardware to put it up. That's over $1,000. And the Rotary Club came through with an application. So once again, we are thankful. You are a community-oriented organization, no doubt about it, and we were the beneficiaries of that. And we're grateful and thank you very much. Now, one of the purposes of the program too is it's not just the name. It's not just the veteran's name. I mean, on Thursday, you're going to hear a lot of names that are inscribed on the cenotaphs of Orono, Newcastle, Bowmanville. Now there's a vision. There's a visible image of that particular man, of that particular veteran. But we stepped it up one more time from that. And we've created, with the assistance of the families, with a lot of research into their service, we've created narratives for each and every one of the banners that we've put up there. These narratives are available online, and the municipality is going to have them shortly all up and displayed on the municipal website. One thing that, being at the front end, I take in the applications. I get to know the people, and it's been. I'm in my 49th year now living in Bowmanville, and of course back and forth to the city. You know, how much did I know about this town? I knew all the kids play hockey, but this has been a real eye opener for me to learn more of the history of the place where I have resided now for 45 years, and the people. The exposure to them, their willingness to tell me all about their history and document it, it's been wonderful. I think that's all I have to say, but I'll let John fill in if he wishes, and I'm sure we could answer any questions you have.
Just a couple of things. Doug has done an enormous amount of research on the names on the cenotaph that are basically unknown. And he's come up with a couple of very interesting things. One of them, and it may affect people in this room, I know it does Steve, a number of the names on the cenotaph belong to home children. Children who were taken off the streets of London or were given up by their mothers in London or their families in London or in England and shipped to Canada in the home children, so-called home children program. These people, many of them would be sent to farms and would work on farms during the harvest or during the summer, basically, from planting to harvest, and then be sent back to school, a boys' school in Peterborough, in this area, only to be placed in other homes, perhaps the following year, as they grew to be young men. Their names appear on the cenotaph, but they have no family here in Canada. They may have had family that they lived with, blood family. They may have kept their names, so the names of the people who they lived with, we don't know particularly. Somehow or other, those young men need to be remembered in some way. And Doug has done an enormous amount of work looking at it, researching their backgrounds. But there's no one who will fill spots, will step out. But their names up on their faces up on the boards. I'm not sure how we're going to accomplish this, but this is an area where we have an opportunity to bring to life these folks who served the country, died for the country, and have no recognition.
I feel an ask here.
It's a annual sales.
there may be. Somehow these folks deserve recognition as well as those who had actual family who were capable of stepping up and sponsoring the bands.
You mentioned the ask. It's important to note that both Doug and Dad put in a fair amount of sweat equity with the club. I know you weren't specifically asking, but lots of people see Dad in the Bruce area of Riverfest. But what a lot of you may not know is that for a few years, Doug was our security commander. He sat quietly in the indoor soccer facility, logged incidents, made sure that we had people out on time, and made sure that that the organizing committee were aware of anything going on. So Doug's put, well, not countless hours, but a whole bunch of hours in. If I sat down and counted them, it'd be a lot. So just wanted to add that.
And I didn't mean to be glib. I think we should put in an application. I think it's something we should consider.
Can you explain sort of, because I see the banners and I know there's cake, and I see the hoopers all. How are the families involved? Like, do they support financially or?
Yes, the initial sponsorship is $200 up front. We make them aware that there are ongoing costs, and somewhere down the line, they'll be asked to contribute more to keep the program going. We suggested initially every 2 years, maybe an amount of $50 to $75. Now our costs are, they cost about $200 per event. Our costs are also for whole hardware. But the biggest cost annually is to get the banners up and get the banners down. Every committed member is in their 70s. We can't do it. And this year, James Printing, who also make the banners, they installed them in Bowmanville and Newcastle for us, and that was a $5,000 cost. They'll remove them too. We have had assistance from Langley Utilities, all those people. They have volunteered their time to send their men out, particularly in the outer areas of Orno, some in Newcastle, Tyrone for sure, and whatever it costs for a truck and two of their people to go out into the air, they do it for free, and we depend on them to do that. But like I said, the ongoing costs, well, so far the banners have held up really nicely, and this is the third year for our first banners. And but somewhere down the line, there's going to be replacement costs as well. I like the fact that in 3 years that we've had banners up, there has been absolutely no damage to the banners. They're respected. That was a concern right off the bat, particularly being close to Halloween. We had them up before then, but no, the banners have been fully respected. And, but covering the ongoing costs, well, it's a balancing act, but we've managed, and quite frankly, there are some sources that we can go to and apply for some funding for those particular individuals that John mentioned. When it came to the Conklin brothers, you know, there's no immediate family left anywhere around. There are cousins and nephews, but they were sponsoring banners of their own. And there are all types of veterans that have served in this area that no longer have family here, and there's no doctors. There's stories of it. And, we can develop something if we obtain the suitable funding. With banners up there.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning, and thank you for all the work you're putting into this. And you say that you guys are all in your 70s, but I'm sure I saw you down there with banners helping get things organized. Did I not see you downtown at some point, I think?
Well, we can't climb the ladders. You put it up.
No, no, you might not be up the ladders, but thank you so much. So, again, I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank you guys online. Tim, it's really nice to see you. I don't know if he's still there or not, but yeah. As we're going to conclude today, Fred is going to share with us. Is Fred still there?
He is.
Okay, Fred.
Hang on here. Let me get this mute thing going.
We hear you.
No, you're muted now.
Hey, how's that? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Remembrance Day is a tough day. I'll tell you something. Once you get 70, boy, you sure can well up those tears pretty easily. Anyway, I'm going to read this terrific poem written by John McCrae, who was a doctor and a soldier. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up the quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. And boy, oh boy, they're still growing, and so are we. Thank you.
Thanks. So, thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing some of you hopefully at the Cenotaph on Thursday. If there's nothing else for the good of Rotary, then we'll call this meeting adjourned.
We'll go home for a minute and see if we're there.
Okay, where am I?